Warning. The following episode contains subject matter and scenes that some viewers may find upsetting, disturbing, or unnerving. Please note, viewer discretion is advised at all times. Sit back and enjoy.
This bomb went off, a homemade kind of bomb, but they also found several other undetonated bombs.
We're looking at the debris right now then.
Killer Norwegian Anders Breivik walking away moments before causing destruction on the 22nd of July. Massive car bomb would rock the centre of Oslo. 8 people dying in the blast. And it didn't end there.
Hello and welcome back to I Could Murder a Podcast. Series 3 is upon us and I'm joined once again by my good pal Ben.
It's good to see you. It's been a while. It's been a long old while.
Has been a long time. A lot of comments saying, when are you coming back? What are you doing? But we're back now and we're ready to go with 12 episodes of series.
A double bounce.
A double bounce, that commonly used phrase. How are you doing, producer Dan?
I'm very good, thanks. Good to have you boys back.
Good to be back.
Back in Boston Sound once again, and we're very excited. We've got lots of cases planned, obviously, and we've got some big things to announce.
Yeah, well, let's start straight away. We've got a Facebook now, officially.
Yeah, officially. There's all these fake ones we had to delete. But yeah, we've got the official Facebook account up now. We'll have new content on there, which we're not putting on Instagram as well. There'll be some kind of new videos on there, so be sure to check that out.
Lovely. We thought about TikTok. We're still not totally sure what that means and how it works, because we're getting old.
We're over the hill.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for your patience. We know it's been a little while. Unfortunately, few obstacles got in the way of us coming back sooner, but we appreciate your patience. I was waiting for the comment, I could murder a podcast, boys, because they've taken so long. Or I could murder a podcast because it's been so long, and I could murder one. They both work.
Yeah, they both work.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
That is actually...
That was probably the best thing you said.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to beat that this series. It's downwards from here.
Yeah, 11 more.
Yeah, wow. Ooh. We also hit the milestone of 100,000 audio downloads, which we're so very grateful for. All the support with that, and also all the support we've had over on Patreon. Anyone supporting us over there, thank you very much. We've got 14 unseen episodes over there. If you do want to have a little look, they're trying to take our money. We're not. It's supporting the podcast. It's supporting all the costs. Boston Sound isn't cheap, is it, Dan?
Not at all.
So this is actually our second run through for this intro, because we had a little bit of you had a little bit of an episode earlier.
We had technical issues.
You had technical issues inside your body.
Fucking hell. I'm really struggling breathing right now. It's laughter. Such laughter.
Which meant we had to stop for a little while. But we're back. You feeling better?
Feel really good. Producer Dan, lovely Boston Sound Dan, made me a peppermint tea for the first time in my life. So two firsts this morning. Asthma attack and...
Not asthma attack.
Some sort of body attack.
Yeah.
And a peppermint tea. So
chronically unfit and peppermint tea. So enough of all that waffle. Let's get into today's case.
So for the first episode of season 3, we have gone with the case of Anders Behring Breivik.
Yes, he was in the running, I think, for series 1 and series 2, but we've kept it until now. We thought it was a big case to start season 3 with.
Yeah, also known as the Norway attacks, which for me kind of really symbolises the lack of crime in Norway.
Yes, you don't immediately, when you think of true crime, you kind of immediately jump over to America. And then you think, oh, there's a bit happening in England. And, I heard a few things happen in Russia. But Scandinavia...
Yeah. I mean, beautiful part of the world, beautiful people, beautiful country.
I want to go there now, after that little bit you just said.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you later then.
But no, I think what was really kind of eye-opening is the fact that this event is referred to as the Norway attacks. You know, we have the London 7/7, Manchester Arena bombings, you know, these terrorist-related events. This is just the Norway attacks. I just think there's a lot to it. You know, as with every case, you know, his formative years are very interesting, but he's one of the few mass shooters that did not end his own life. Spoiler alert.
Yes, that is...
Or did he?
Tune into this now to find out. I think going into it, I had a very, even though I hadn't done much research on it obviously prior to this, and I thought I had a very clear picture in my head of what I thought he was, or the kind of guy he was, which is odd. And then doing the research, he was very different to how I imagined.
Yeah, completely agree. It was the same for me. And I remember as well, as it happened, there was a lot of coverage on what happened on the island, but I don't remember anything really about the bombing.
So as we always do, we like to look at the past and the history of the killers, in this case, Anders Breivik. Was there anything in his childhood that set him off to be where he is today?
Was he formed or was he born? The age-old question.
He definitely was born, 100%.
I think so.
I've got a big feeling. Spoiler alert, he was born.
Anders Behring Breivik was born on February 13th, 1979 in Oslo, Norway. His father, Jens David Breivik, was a diplomat for the Norwegian embassy in London. His mother, it's spelt wench, but we have learnt that it's Wenche. His mother, Wenche Behring, was a nurse who spent the first year of Anders' life bringing up the family in London. However, Jens and Wenche would have a very turbulent marriage which resulted in divorce, and Wenche would move the family back to Oslo, Norway.
Yes, with Jens remaining in London. So Anders' relationship with his mother was very complicated, and it even spanned back before he was even born. She said she actually wanted to have an abortion, but she wasn't able to because she reached the three-month limit. She said when she was feeling kicks that he was doing it on purpose to torment her, which is, it's like she was calling him evil before he was even born.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be a super happy moment for an expecting mother. Oh, the baby's kicking, get over it, you know. And for her to feel that was an intentional kick from, you know, an unborn Anders is, that says a lot about her perception.
And the hatred carried on after he was born. She stopped breastfeeding him because she said that he was sucking the life out of her. He said he was a nasty child that wreaked havoc and tormented her. And this is a 2-year-old. Growing up in a household where, you know, your maternal figure, your mother, is like visibly hates you and like doesn't want to be around you and
mistreats you.
Yeah, it must be a very hard thing to grow up in.
Yeah, I read that she felt that he was also really clingy and really trying to kind of cling onto her in any way he could, but also really needy as a child, which again, from her perspective, may have been maybe a misjudgment. I don't know. Yeah,
he used to like sleeping in the bed with her at a young age. But I mean, I don't think that's anything too crazy, to be honest. It's the psychologists have actually looked into this and they've said that it's a 3-generation hypothesis, which is basically if someone's parents had a difficult childhood relationship with their parents, they subsequently failed to develop a healthy relationship with their own children. So his mother growing up had a really complicated relationship with her mother, which I will go into now. So Anders' mother's relationship with his grandmother was very torrid as well. She contracted polio virus at the time of his mother's birth, which she went on to really associate with her. You know, blaming her for it, blaming, you know, her illness on her being born. So it's very similar in terms of the kind of hatred when being born.
Yeah, I read that she told him on multiple occasions, even as an infant, kind of 2, 3, 4-year-old, that she wished he was dead.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
The grandmother consequently was paralysed from the waist down and came to live in complete isolation. Her father died when she was 8 years old, and according to psychological reports, this was the start of her personal nightmare. So with her mother wheelchair bound, it was all on her to look after her mother at 8 years old. Her mother would develop paranoia and hallucinations. she'd often say to her, "This is your fault." So her mother would hear voices and see things, and she was very isolated from the outside world. She was just kind of looking after her mother.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a hotbed for kind of mental health would be struggling very much so there.
So that's kind of learned behaviour from how her mum treated her. She's then taken on to treat Anders in almost exactly the same regard. Yeah, maybe minus the hallucinations.
Yeah, in the same, she's treating him in exactly the same kind of contempt. She links, she didn't want to have this baby. He was born. It seems to be, it's the psychologists believe that it's essentially mirroring the kind of relationship she had growing up.
Yeah, and obviously it was a really turbulent divorce that she had with Jens, and apparently that then kind of influenced her to harbour a real hatred for males, and she again would take that out on young Anders, frequently being physically aggressive, verbally aggressive, emotionally, mentally aggressive, but also kind of projecting some sexualization onto him as well as a very young boy. So it was a real messy dynamic.
So when Anders was attending nursery and being looked after by other people, they would see things within him that made them alarm bells ring for them. They were very aware of how the mother was as well with him, because she would say things like, "I wish he was dead," and he was evil to other people, which even when hugging him, talking to them, saying that which
timing, not a strong suit.
It's very there's something not right here. Even the way Anders behaved, he was very kind of isolated. He wouldn't interact with other children very well. He didn't really seem to show much emotion. He never cried, which was a real standout thing for them, which made them bring people in, child psychologists in, to actually see Anders and see how he behaved. Yeah. And they came to the conclusion that something should be done and he should be taken out of the mother's care.
Yeah, so they raised a care order for him, which the specialists that were assessing him and the mental health teams raised that care order, which in Norway means that the child social services would then have to engage in removing him from the mother's care and placing him into foster care. So you have to think, if they followed through with that, how different could his life have been? Yeah,
and that has been blamed quite a lot since the attacks. During that time when they wanted to take Anders into care, his father tried to get custody, but basically it was turned down because strangely the nursery changed the report and said no, he was a very happy child and very normal child, which is what the authorities then go, okay, well he seems happy enough, we'll keep him in his mother's care. Though she did take up the option of having a bit of extra support by some foster parents who would take Anders for a while. Though the foster parents would go on to explain to the police that the mum acted in a very inappropriate way when she was handing over Anders to their care. She actually asked the foster parents if Anders would be allowed to touch the man's penis because he had no one to compare himself to in terms of appearance. All he ever saw was girl parts. So it's a deeply disturbing. Yeah, I think that kind of added into this idea that there's a weird sexual flow in terms of the relationship there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that really stood out of his childhood, not that didn't stand out, was that when they were making these assessments of him, they found that he had a smile that was not connected to his feelings.
So to quote one of the child services, they had this to say of Anders: "The family is in dire need of help. Anders should be removed from the family and given a better standard of care. The mother is provoked by him and remains in an ambivalent position which prevents him from developing on his own terms." So very much pointing out that his mum is hindering his development, making him... Same with how her mother was to her. It massively affected how she grew up and how she saw the world, and they were worried this was going to be the same case for Anders.
And that's it. And the first 2 years or the first 4 years of a child's life are so important in their development and what forms them and how they, how they would go on to act and the people they would grow up to become. And for him, it's just a place that is... I can't imagine how horrible that must have been.
Well, it's the whole thing is like, you're a kid, where's your safe place? It's home, it's with your family, it's where you want to be, it's kind of where you feel comfortable. But if you're in a situation where the person who, is your mother, is your maternal guardian, having someone who literally says, I don't love you, I wish you weren't born, I wish you were dead, that must be...
You kicked my womb.
Yeah.
Sucked the life out of me.
Now go to your room. So we're going to jump forward a bit here. He's remained in his mother's care, and he grows up and he becomes a little bit of a tearaway. What's your classic thing you do if you're a bit of a tearaway? Graffiti.
Yeah, this surprised me. I did not recall this from any of the news stories that I heard, but he's big on the Norwegian graffiti scene.
Yes. He apparently was very vigilant in terms of how he planned it, because you had to break into places, you need the certain paints. He was very meticulous in terms of getting those things sorted out. And he was fairly well known in the scene.
Yeah, so I mean, he's caught on a couple of occasions. He's caught by police, so they are actively watching him. But he's also very organised, takes it very, very seriously, as you said, and he does become fairly renowned on the scene. However, he also feels slightly rejected by other fellow graffiti artists and not accepted by them.
What's one of these times you mentioned when he was caught? He was fined, and this was the point his father cut off contact with him and hadn't spoken to him since, which seems. Obviously, his dad wanted to take Anders into his own care when the child welfare came in, but wasn't unable to. And it seems a bit of a strange. I mean, that rejection as well must hurt. At 16, you've been caught graffitiing. That to me isn't a big enough thing to be like, I'm not going to talk to my child anymore. But Breivik also got very much into his weight training and started using anabolic steroids.
Yeah, he wanted to be as big as possible to appear stronger and more powerful and more in control of his life at this point. I mean, throughout his school years, he was said to be someone that protected others from bullies. But again, that's just one schoolmate that came forward to say that.
Apparently, his graffiti phase would go on a lot longer than most. So yeah, he was very much still in that scene when other people maybe faded away. So I guess even his crowd around that point would have moved away from him. But he was always quite an isolated, insular kind of guy.
Yeah, and it was actually part of the hip-hop community of West Oslo that kind of took Anders under their wing. But again, they kind of, once he'd started to interact with them and a bit of his personality would come out, when he, did feel, safe enough to share that with them, very quickly he became a rejected outcast of an already outcast group of people.
So Breivik had criticised his parents for supporting the policies of the Norwegian Labour Party, and also his mother for being, in his opinion, a moderate feminist.
Yeah, so this is the first signs we see of any kind of political stance taken by Anders. His mother would later remarry a soldier who was part of the Norwegian army, but there's nothing else I can really find that really provoked him to go so anti-left.
Yeah, I mean, because Scandinavia was always looked at quite inclusive and it's quite, it's very welcoming, but all he's seen so far in his life is rejection, from the person who should support him the most.
Yeah.
Maybe someone who believes in, the Labour Party of it being quite welcoming, him being shunned from her, and maybe his graffiti pals leaving him, all that kind of stuff.
Towards the latter end of his teenage years, he falls out with his best friend, who is a big part of the West Oslo hip-hop community, and that kind of puts a tie to him finishing, wrapping up the graffiti scene. So he moves on and he gets a job in a customer service call centre. He did apply to enlist in the Norwegian army shortly before then, but was rejected and deemed not fit for service.
Yes, unfit for service he was, but that seemed to be a gripe for him going forward.
Yeah, he's put all that effort on getting himself looking big and strong. And
although he didn't get into the army, he did actually purchase a lot of army outfits and wear them around the house.
Yeah, he had a whole array of outfits.
Yeah, there's lots of pictures, because that's the thing as well, like he kind of, when the case happened, you saw pictures of him and you assumed, okay, well, he's got an army background, which he didn't. He just would wear them around the house. He got very much into playing COD, got very into his games, World of Warcraft, all those things. He was very, as I said, very isolated, but just casually wearing that kind of get up around the house.
Yeah, and outfits will play a part as we progress in this timeline. At the age of 21, picks up this role in the customer service centre. He's said to be extremely good at the role. However, is clearly unsettled and unhappy when dealing with customers that are either of an Arab descent or South Asian. So he makes his tone completely changes when dealing with these customers, to the point where he almost puts the phone down on every person that he feels is a minority. So he's lived a fairly solitary life so far. He had a couple of friends on the West Oslo hip-hop scene, the graffiti scene, a couple of friends at school. Family life is not a good place for him, and he's got a few colleagues that think fairly highly of him in the customer service centre. He does meet a young Belarus woman on an online dating site and visits Belarus to meet her. She would also later return and visit him in Oslo, but apart from that, we can't really find any additional information.
No, she went on to say that he hated women.
There you go.
That could well be down to his relationship with his mother as well.
So he continues working in the customer service role, but whilst doing this, launches his own computer programming company. And by the age of 24, he has actually already made his first 1 million kroner, which is roughly £100,000. He uses this money to rent out a farmhouse in the countryside. Lovely, beautiful Norwegian countryside. And this is where the timeline takes a slightly drastic turn.
Yes, Breivik Geofarm was the name.
There you go.
So now we've looked into Anders' past, we're going to look at a timeline now leading up to the attack.
So, 1999, a young Anders Breivik is initially inspired to his actions by the Kosovo War, as well as the 1999 NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, primarily due to Norway's involvement in this. Breivik saw the war as an attack on Serbia's attempt to drive Islam out by deporting the Albanian Muslims back to Albania.
So at this stage, he's 20 years old. So he seems to be, that's probably the age you do get into politics, I guess.
Yeah,
So-
and he's obviously, I think at the moment, the only thing we can kind of interpret is that he's harnessed the opposite political view of his mother.
Yeah.
And he really focused on
I
that.
think that'd be fair to say. 2002, Breivik claims to have taken part in the founding meeting in London of the international organisation, a resurrection of the medieval Knights Templar. It's actually unclear if this organisation exists or is a figment of Breivik's imagination.
2006, to save money for his eventual attacks, Breivik terminates the lease on his Oslo apartment and moves back in with his mother.
In 2009, Breivik establishes the company Geofarms, supposedly to farm vegetables and root crops.
He doesn't really have the face of a farmer.
He could be Amish.
He could be Amish, and I think there were actually the farming community also were fairly rejecting of him, in that he was very, very much appearing like a city dweller and a city folk. And
You call that a crop?
this is a crop. 2010. Breivik visits Prague in an attempt to buy illegal weapons. The attempt is a failure, and Breivik decides to obtain weapons through legal channels instead. So on that, Prague for me, I did not know was like a weapons capital or a gun.
He went there and he provided fake documents to imply that he's police.
Yes, he ordered a fake ID online.
Yeah.
And made it into a police badge.
Yeah.
But Prague is, for me, a stag capital. I didn't know that guns were if I... Mind you, where would you go if you did want a gun?
Why? Yeah, need to know. I think we shouldn't be advertising people with. Yeah, I mean, what my point was.
Go on.
Was more the sense of if Prague were like, these documents they're forged, there should be some form of
arrest
or something. Yeah, it can't just be like, we're not going. No, this is not real.
Yeah.
Because he must be going through the formal way of doing it because he had to provide documentation. It's not he's buying it off someone off the street because they wouldn't be selling it to a policeman. April 2011, Breivik rents a farm in Asta in Interland to perform farming.
He tries to buy a significant amount of fertilizer at a store in Oslo but fails to find the correct type. According to the store assistant, he was in the company of a friend when trying to make the purchase.
The Norwegian Police Security Service registered Breivik making a purchase of certain chemicals from Poland, but due to the low value of the purchase, no action is taken.
May 2011, Breivik buys a large quantity of fertilizer at a local store in Reyna.
What a load of shit, is what he said when it arrived.
Very good.
For some people who may not know, the reason you'd buy such things as fertilizer and these chemicals is, in fact, to create a bomb.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are some photos of the farmhouse he had, and he had taken them himself of prepping the bombs, and it's a significant amount. I mean, it's a huge quantity, and no one questioned it because...
I think that's one of those things where if someone who lived in or worked on a certain bit of land which wasn't very farmy, you'd be like, okay, this is bizarre. But the fact that he worked on a farm and, it registered this company as Geofarm and he was doing vegetables, and I don't think it would lead you to question it. Obviously now, looking back, you're like, that they should have been curious on that. Well, and like buying the guns thing, as I said, from Prague, if they flagged that and they put that together, then
idea,
yeah, they might be...
Breivik's farmer neighbour would describe him as looking like a city dweller who wore expensive shirts and who knew nothing about living in rural ways.
What, so we're at 2011. I mean, rural ways.
It could be just a very tight-knit farming community up there, but he would also say that the windows were constantly covered up in the house. So this guy is interesting. Within that farming community, there was also a small bar where sometimes Breivik would go in for a drink, but again, keep to himself. Now, the guy that owned this bar used to work as a profiler of passengers' body language at Oslo airport. And he said that there was nothing unusual about Breivik whatsoever.
But I guess if you're in an airport, you're looking at people who are about to commit a crime in the airport, therefore they might be a bit agitated. If someone's going to a bar to order a Budweiser, oh, he's acting suspicious. I think he wanted a Carlsberg. But fair point. I get it. It was interesting.
You bastard. You bastard.
So now we're at the 22nd of July 2011, which is the day of the attacks. So through this, we're going to go through the time stamps of the day as well.
And this is the part for me when it is broken down. I remember this happening. I remember the news footage, but I really only remember the focus being on what happened on the island.
Yeah.
I don't remember as much being made of what we'll now go into.
Even compiling the footage for the intro and whatnot, the vastness of the actual what we're about to go into. I didn't realise it was as much of an explosion as it was.
Yes, yeah.
But
yeah.
We're going to get into it. So 3:13 p.m, a white Volkswagen Crafter is recorded by surveillance cameras when entering Grubegata, which is the district of the government building complex. The car stops 200 metres from the H block. The car remains here with the hazard lights on for 1 minute and 54 seconds.
3:15 p.m, the driver starts driving the last 200 meters to the H block. And this is what was picked up by the surveillance camera. You can see that, and it's a massive van. You can see him pull in, you can see him kind of looking and kind of judging where the best place to leave the van will be. So this is all picked up on by the surveillance footage. He parks the large van outside of the government building. He's sat in there for up to a minute more, I would imagine at this point, maybe setting the bomb.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
He then leaves the van and starts walking towards Hammersberg Torg, where he had a silver Fiat Doblo parked. And again, there's footage of him kind of walking. He looks very skinny, very tall and very skinny. And he's also dressed in full police uniform, including, it looks like a kind of PPE face visor.
Yeah, I mean, when he's driving around in the no entrance part, I mean, someone dressed in that, you immediately, that's like someone in high vis, you immediately assume they've got a...
He looks like one of those guys that are dropping off money at a bank.
Yes.
That's kind of how he looks, like a security guard.
Yeah, which if, you think, okay, well, they're doing this, but they're dressed in the way that kind of indicates that they're allowed to do it, is what they kind of take away from that. But yeah, it's when you see it, it's very surreal, especially him walking down the street and leaving it, knowing what's about to happen. At 3:18 p.m, a witness sees what he first describes as a suspicious-looking man leaving the government quarter in downtown Oslo. Seconds later, he hears the man unlock a car at Hammersborg Torg and sees a glimpse of the driver when he drives the car towards the traffic in the one-way street. He finds the event suspicious and takes note of the car's registration number.
Wow. Kudos to that man.
Yeah, I've seen someone walking like... Yeah, I mean, I guess it is jarring seeing someone in that outfit. And as you said, he was wearing a kind of head visor, which...
And I think, if I remember rightly, he's holding something that looks like a gun, but I don't think it is a gun at this point, before he obviously goes on to do what he does. So, yeah, interesting from this guy. Interesting intuition.
Yeah. Not like that guy in the bar.
No, not at all. 3:25 p.m, a bomb placed in the Volkswagen Crafter explodes in Grubegata near the offices of the Norwegian Prime Minister and several other governmental buildings, blowing out the windows of the Prime Minister's offices and damaging the finance and oil ministries. 8 people were killed. Rubble and glass littered the streets, and smoke from the fires drifted across the city from the devastated area. I mean, the footage of this, and this is what I don't remember seeing in the news when it happened. It is, I mean, it's like kind of ground zero level footage here. Alarms going off, people on the floor, people rushing to help one another.
Yeah, there's some handheld footage of a guy who goes in to try and help people out of the buildings. I mean, luckily, this was, I think it was a public holiday, was it?
Yes.
So a lot of people weren't in the offices at this time. They'd already gone home. So.
And July 22nd was also a Friday. So if this had been any other day of the week, apparently the victim count could have been so much higher.
Yeah, which is, considering people have said he's very meticulous, that's kind of a bit of an undersight. I mean, or if he was trying to get as much,
for everything else that he's planned, so to the point, this seems to be maybe a slight lapse.
Yeah. But yeah, the explosion, the footage and everything like that, and all the handheld footage, it is absolutely incredible how much damage that did. It's horrible to look.
Witnesses described the scene as a war zone. The death toll would have been far higher, as we said, had it not been a Friday afternoon, and many people in the government building were actually on their summer holidays. The Norwegian Prime Minister was unimpacted by this because he was working from home, preparing to give a speech at the Utoya Island the following day.
And as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this isn't the kind of thing that happens in Scandinavia. I mean, it doesn't, it's not a thing that happens at a lot of places in the world, but this felt so, Oslo is a very peaceful place. So they were very, very kind of scared that this wasn't just a singular attack. They were thinking this could be, it's a terrorist attack. It could be multiple buildings can be blown up. And a lot of people were on, a high alert immediately.
Well, exactly. This had never happened to their country before. I think nationally it has at the time, one of the lowest crime rates in Europe. It's a lot of panic and a lot of people not knowing what's just happened and what's happening next.
You could apparently hear the explosion from miles and miles away. So obviously with this going on and a lot of people hearing the noise and obviously words spreading quickly, people who weren't with, their loved ones would ring them and make sure they're okay. A lot of people would then go on to call their children who were actually on the Utøya Island for a Labour youth camp.
So the initial reports, they're viewing this as similar to many of the attacks they've witnessed in America and England, and they thought it was from possibly Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. So they are initially wanting to contact their loved ones as soon as possible, and a lot of the politicians' children were on Utoya Island, so they're reaching out to them as soon as possible.
Yeah, one of the children that were on the island got a call from his parents, and his name Adrian Prakon, and he actually said they thought this was the safest place to be in Oslo because it was isolated. It wasn't, it was an island, so it was away from the explosion. And I think the parents kind of took a bit of comfort in that, thinking,
well, they're on an island.
Yeah,
safest place in the world for them.
Yeah, safest place in Oslo. So 4:30 p.m, the participants at the summer camp at the Workers' Youth League, a youth movement associated with the Norwegian Labour Party on Utøya, gather in the camp's main house to be informed about the event.
4:55 p.m, Anders Breivik, disguised in police uniform, arrives at the ferry landing just south of Utoya Island. He parks up his silver Fiat Doblo and tries to board a ferry.
So so obviously he turns up in the police uniform. He says he's going to Utoya Island, kind of to look into the bomb blasts, and also to go over there and make sure everyone's okay. And if anything, suggest he's going over there to protect them in case anything was to happen. So obviously everyone's under a lot of shock at this moment, and the ferryman seeing a policeman in their eyes, with the ID, they're going to let him on board and escort him over there because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So 5:18 p.m, Breivik arrives at Utøya Island. He had given a fake name to the ferryman, the name Martin Nilsson. He arrives, claiming to do research into the connection with the Oslo bomb blasts. He arrives armed as well, and he is insinuating he's there to make sure that everyone's protected and safe.
Yeah, he's also carrying a couple of kind of what look like suitcases, as well as he's already got weaponry on display. He's got a rifle and a pistol kind of holstered on his body, but as well as that, he's got some carry cases. Breivik arrives on the island and tries to explain to greeters on the island what he's there to do. And initially, they're very suspicious of him. There were a couple of camp leaders that were dubious about the ID. They did ask to see identification. Breivik would then react by firing the first shot and murdering the two greeters. Breivik then goes on to shoot and kill scores of young people staying on the island camp. Although initial reports said about 10 people had been killed, the figure soared drastically as horrific details emerged.
So reports from some of the eyewitnesses on the island at this point where they saw groups of people just running across the island, screaming, and this person was in the cafeteria area, and they didn't know what was going on, thought maybe it was some kind of game that was happening. They came outside and they were told there's a shooter on the island. They initially didn't know what to think of that, because obviously it's such a are they right, they're correct, and then they see the person walking over the hill, they see Breivik come in, and then they realise this is true. Mm-hmm. Obviously it's an island, you've only got so many places you can kind of run to.
Each option, when you go through the different options the young people had as well, it just until you're in that position, God knows what you would do, but each option is horrible. So you could either hide in the forest, hide in the shore and in the rocks, or you could hide within some of the buildings and risk that, try and swim. I think it was 600 meters to shore.
Yeah, then there's reports of people who did attempt to do that, and they were obviously fully clothed, and it was too heavy, and they even turned back around. Anders, when he was preparing himself for this, he used to play a lot of things like Call of Duty, games to kind of plan and, try and get in character for this kind of moment. And a lot of times when you hear news reports, this kind of thing is a crazed gunman, but he was very calculated, smooth and calm. He'd walk around picking off people. Yeah, it was random. He was killing people, whoever was there. Essentially, it wasn't a case of he had particular people in sights. He did kill the kind of the camp leaders immediately. No one felt safe, and everyone had to try and act straight away of how can I get out of the situation.
And there were reports as well of obviously him showing mercy to a couple of people he encountered as well. Now many would play dead, so we talked a lot about that kind of when we covered the Columbine case. Yeah. Many would play dead, and Breivik didn't want to chance that, so would fill any laying bodies with multiple shots. But he did encounter an 11-year-old boy whose father was actually one of the very first victims killed on arrival on the island, and he was a security guard on the island who Breivik had killed. And the boy said, why would you kill me? You've just killed my father. And so Breivik showed him mercy and didn't kill him. There was also a slightly older teenage guy that Breivik apparently showed mercy to because he looked Aryan.
Yes, that's Adrian Brackon, the guy I mentioned earlier. He looked at him and thought he looked like someone who was part of his team. Yeah. So he would show him mercy. But Adrian was one of the kids who thought the only option here is to swim away. He went into the lake, started swimming, and he realised his clothes were so heavy. He was tired. He wasn't going to make it. He thought the only thing he can do is return and try and hide on the island. So he actually turns around. By the time he reaches the island again, Breivik's there with the gun, pointing at him, and then he shows mercy and says, "No, you're one of the team." But ironically, it would go on that he would be the last person that Breivik shoots at the end. He shot Adrian at the very end, in the shoulder, I believe it to be, just before. Yeah, so he was spared, but he still ended up being shot.
And there are reports as well of him at multiple occasions, because it's not a very big island, and ironically, when you look at it from kind of the helicopter view, which those images were absolutely haunting, but it's kind of a heart-shaped island, and towards the north of the island is where it's very much woodland. And apparently, those that hadn't seen he was in a police uniform, he would coax out, saying, "I'm the police, I'm here to help you, come out." And as soon as they would come out, he'd obviously then start spraying bullets at them, which is just absolutely hideous. I mean, there was one particular photo, which I believe, again, was one of the news helicopters, and it's Breivik aiming the gun into the water, and as the camera kind of pans out, there's a boy or a girl sat semi-submerged in the water with their hands up. And the news cameras actually thought at first it was just children swimming, and they thought it was seen innocent enough, and then it turned out to be the absolute worst situation possible. Obviously the children on there who had already spoken to their parents early on, they've started flooding messages to their parents saying what's happening, telling them they love them, calling the police. They were also texting each other as well to alert them of where the shooter was located, and I mean this had positive and negative kind of repercussions in that they could get away if he was into the forest. They would move by the rocks and they would let each other know. But there was one instance where I believe a group of them were hiding in one of the cafeteria's walk-in freezers, and a text message tone would go off that then alerted Breivik to where people were, and he would open up and
So the first shot was fired at 5:22 p.m. and at 5:24 p.m. the emergency medical services are informed about the shooting, and at 5:25 the police in Oslo also were informed about the shooting. So they've been informed very quickly, very early on. Obviously they're still probably getting floods of calls from people about the bombing. Which is his plan. Breivik's plan is I'll put a bomb over there, that's going to distract a lot of people, buy me time to go over here and do this.
Because we'll go on to say there are some elements of this where he's been highly sophisticated, cunning, and well thought out and well planned. But there are other elements where he's been really kind of simple and not the smartest, not the brightest plug. Brightest plug? Bulb. Not the brightest plug. Not the brightest plug. But I think obviously he's done to go back to Columbine again, they were trying to create a distraction by setting a field on fire or setting a bomb off in a field. Yeah. Didn't really do much to cause a distraction, whereas he has got a living, breathing distraction that has obviously taken other lives as well. And all of the police are swarming towards Oslo when he's gone in the opposite direction to carry out this attack.
Yeah.
5:30 p.m. Delta, a police tactical unit situated in Oslo, is dispatched to Utøya Island.
5:40, the Delta team are en route. Meanwhile, the gunman continued his killing spree undisturbed, randomly shooting victims, and according to eyewitness reports, eyewitnesses stated they could constantly smell the gunpowder.
So 5:50 p.m. the police patrol arrive on the kind of ferry port just south of Utøya Island. However, they are having to wait for a suitable boat before they can cross over to Utøya, so they can hear and see the chaos. I mean, it was only kind of a 10-15 minute boat journey to the island, so they can see everything going on, hear the screams, but they are stranded and unable to get to the island immediately, which must have just been hideous.
Feeling absolutely helpless. So this is quite a strange thing, and as you mentioned before at the beginning of the episode, this is a different case because it's a spree killing, which doesn't end in Breivik taking his own life.
Yeah.
And at 6:01, Breivik calls 112, which is the emergency telephone number. He calls to surrender, but he hangs up and continues to kill people. Apparently he made the call twice. He makes the call later on as well, but he doesn't say anything. He just hangs up.
Yeah, I think the first call he made, he demanded to speak to like the head of a tactical unit or some very superior officer, and they were like, "Well, who are you? No, what's going on?" And they didn't really show him the kind of the concern that he believed he deserved. So he hung up. But, the kind of conflicting reports there.
Yeah. The other one I read was just literally he rang, then hung up, and he rang and hung up. Which, I don't know if that's goading them and just kind of take the piss, but
or indecisive.
Yep.
But that's the thing. I mean, for a spree killer, as you said, we've done the Stephen Paddock Vegas shooter. We've done the Columbine case. We're now doing Breivik. This is kind of I hate to use the word, this is the ideal condition for a spree killer because he's got them on an island. None of them are armed. None of them can overpower him. None of them can fight back. No one can get to him to stop him.
6:09, the Delta team arrives, are also forced to wait for a boat. The boat that is finally provided is too small for the number of personnel and amount of equipment, and the engine stops during the crossing, almost causing the boat to sink. Local police chief Erik Berger said a police boat intended to transport the armed unit nearly sank. When so many people and equipment were put into it, the boat started to take on water, so the motor stopped. The boat was way too small and way too poor. The team transfers onto two privately owned console boats. Lots of local residents are using boats to rescue victims trying to swim away. I remember one of the reports, one of the boatmen on one of the documentaries I watched said he was going toward the island and he thought what he saw was just someone's jersey floating in the water, and he got close to it and it was just a body floating, and I think that alerted what was going on. And yeah, it's amazing that like local residents, team together to save.
And again, the fact that a news helicopter was able to get there to get all these images before a police helicopter or a police boat could even get there, and as well, I mean, the number of kind of jerseys, as you say, or clothing, but that turn out to be bodies that you can see, the numbers are staggering and everywhere as well, and he just does not stop.
Yeah.
6:25 p.m. Delta arrives on Utøya and goes ashore. Now, as this specialist team of police are arriving on the island, the young people there still believe that these police are fake and there to hurt them, so they are kind of reluctant to go forward to the safety of the arriving police officers, which is unimaginable.
Yeah, it's totally understandable, though, isn't it? So the police are finally there. This is just over an hour after the first shot is fired, which, as we said, the police do get a bit of a pelting about this, but there has been an explosion which has never happened before in Oslo. A lot of people are called to that scene, and then obviously the troubles with the boats and whatnot. It's a lot of things just not working in their favour here, but the police do arrive, and this is the kind of bit where, from our previous mass shootings that we said, this is a stage usually where you'd imagine Breivik would either try and shoot at the policeman or he would kill himself.
Yeah.
But no, Breivik at 6:34 p.m. Breivik does not resist arrest, and he is apprehended by the police.
Yeah, there's a couple of statements here. But apparently, whilst he was calling 112 and then hanging up and then calling and hanging up, trying to surrender, thoughts did go through his head of suicide, but he opted to not go down that route. Apparently, when police did finally apprehend him, two things happened. He sought immediate medical attention because he had a 4mm gash on his finger, the result of which was by shooting someone in the head at close range and skull fragment cutting his finger. So the arrogance
that's him diagnosing that's what that was.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Which, yeah, I mean, and the other thing is the fact he said he was so dehydrated, I'm going to die, give me water.
So he's a narcissistic...
Yeah, he's demanding things
immediately.
Surrendered. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, he had over an hour unopposed to commit his killing spree on the island, and as you said, it's such a in that sense an ideal situation for what he was after. 186 minimum shots fired during this time,
and the medical team conducting the autopsies also revealed that of those shots fired, he'd used hollow point ammunition, which had impacted obviously severely the bodies that the bullets had struck, and they'd said that they'd never seen damage done to bodies like this to this level ever before. So of the July 22nd attacks, the total victim count was 77 people, 8 of them by the bombing in Oslo and 69 by the shooting on Utoya Island, which is just a staggering number of people. All of them, well, majority of them being young, all of them being innocent, of course, but majority of them being young children in some cases, teenagers in most cases.
Yeah, the youth camp was attended by 600 teenagers, which, you know, that's so many people there. So when this attack took place, Breivik's mother was still alive. She's passed away now, but she described herself as the saddest mother in the world, who both hated and loved her son. And she had no inkling whatsoever that he was planning the attacks. And she actually was cooking him a dinner of spaghetti that had got cold as she was waiting in vain for him to return. She watched the news and the bombings and the shootings, and then when it became clear, obviously she was very shocked. She had no inkling whatsoever. I mean, I guess no one had the inkling of that kind of thing happening. But another interesting thing, which again I had no idea of this being reported, was when the police didn't just arrest Breivik when they got there.
Yes.
The police also arrested a 17-year-old survivor. The youth was reportedly stripped naked and locked up in a jail cell located only meters away from Breivik. The reasons they said to have arrested him was that his haircut was different to his identifying documents, and he was thought to be an accomplice of Breivik. They kept him in custody for 17 hours, and his family weren't told about this, and the family assumed he was dead. He also as a child had witnessed other mass murders in a separate incident in a Republican Russia.
And apparently that was also why when they arrived at the island to make the arrests and to rescue the remaining survivors, apparently he wasn't as emotional or as upset as the rest of the young people, which is why they decided he's got to be an accomplice.
His name was Ansor Dukaev. Yeah, he was completely innocent, and the police made a grave error there.
So once they get Breivik into custody, they take him to be placed into jail, and they have to photograph Breivik for evidence in terms of his own wounds. They ask him to strip so that they can take photos of him, and this is quite strange. He does one of the kind of Greek god poses with the hand on the knee.
Wow.
Just like that. Tries to pose like a bodybuilder. They just say, no, just a natural one, please. Breivik admitted to the crimes and said that the purpose of the attack was to save Norway and Western Europe, for that matter, from a Muslim takeover, and that the Labour Party had to pay the price for letting down Norway and the Norwegian people. After his arrest, Breivik referred to himself as the greatest monster since Quisling. And Quisling was a Norwegian Nazi collaborator during the Second World War, found guilty of terrible, terrible things. That's a Wikipedia page you do not want to fall down.
So an hour and a half before the bombings, Breivik would release a manifesto online, which was called 2083, a European Declaration of Independence. And this was at 1,500 pages long.
So Breivik would later admit in court that it was mostly other people's writings he had copied and pasted from different websites. So this is where we say, in some aspects building up to the attack and carrying out the attacks himself, he was quite highly sophisticated, he thought the plan through, but in terms of his actual legacy or this manifesto, it's plagiarism.
Yeah, I mean, he also did a really strange thing, was interviewing himself essentially.
Yeah.
And put himself on a pedestal throughout the whole thing,
as if he was a hero and a Knights of Templar leading man.
Yeah.
So in this manifesto, he would claim that he was protecting Europe from multiculturalism, as well as stating that political correctness is evil.
It's an interesting quote from the director of the film, July 22nd, which is an adaptation of... Well,
it's essentially a recreation, isn't it, on Netflix.
Yeah, of the actual attack. And he said that it's important that whenever there's a fire, it doesn't help just to shut the door. So the fact this manifesto is out there, he thinks it's important that people learn from this, and that if people don't listen to other people's points and they feel the need to act in such a drastic way, conversations need to happen, discussions need to happen. It's important to have debate. It's important to have a society where people are able to discuss and obviously to learn and grow. And this kind of thing, if you just shut a door on it and say, oh no, it festers, it then turns into something a lot more drastic and horrible, which I think whenever there's a fire, it doesn't help to shut the door. I think it's quite a powerful quote over all this.
Because he came under quite a bit of fire itself, ironically. When the film was released, Norwegians were very, very unhappy that a film was even being made by it. I think there was a poll that was carried out the year after the attacks, in which it found that 25% of all Norwegians knew someone that was personally impacted by the attacks.
I think the thing is, Breivik himself said that this was a three-pronged attack. It was the case of the bombing, it was the case of the shooting on the island, and then it was the trial.
Yeah,
because the trial, that was where he wanted to get his voice, and I think people not wanting the film to exist was a case of it's glorifying him or giving him a voice and promoting him and giving him this fame as well that he obviously likes. I mean, even when he goes into the courtrooms and he's doing the salutes and he's doing all those things, he's just soaking up and
because as well as the manifesto, he posted a 12-minute video which there are clips of them displaying in court. I mean, it looks like it's been put together by PowerPoint, but he posted that 12-minute kind of slideshow video, which brought Breivik, the only time he showed any emotion in court, to tears. And he is getting very welled up at his own production. So within this 12-minute video as well, he put an animation depicting Islam as a Trojan horse in Europe. The video, which promotes fighting against Islam, shows Breivik wearing a wetsuit and holding an automatic weapon. And I think these were the early images that we saw when he was first apprehended. Yeah,
there's a lot of images, of him, as I said before, wearing the kind of army uniforms and whatnot, which makes you believe, he's obviously got a past, but he never was actually part of the army.
So, should we get into the trial?
Yes.
In a pre-trial hearing in February 2012, Breivik read a prepared statement demanding to be released immediately and treated as a national hero for his preemptive attack against traitors accused of planning cultural genocide. He said they are committing or planning to commit cultural destruction, including deconstruction of the Norwegian ethnic group and deconstruction of Norwegian culture. This is the same as ethnic cleansing. The criminal trial of Breivik began on the 16th of April 2012 in Oslo courthouse under the jurisdiction of Oslo District Court. Now, some of the footage here, it looks like a gymnasium. That's not me having a pop at the Norwegian judicial system. It's just, that's how it looks. I like everything else. I like the buildings, I like the houses.
It's fine.
Okay.
All right, so the much-studied Norwegian system is built on something called the restorative system. Every victim is given a voice, in this case meaning the court heard 77 autopsies, 77-minute-long biographies for the victims, and 174 court-appointed lawyers for the victims. So, that's great. Obviously, sometimes in this kind of thing, a lot of people's names, and they can be lost within just a statistic. So it's very good that they're actually supporting that behind it. So Breivik got sentenced to 21 years, which is the max sentence in Norway for anything less severe than war crimes or genocide, which is less than 100 days per murder. However, this can be extended indefinitely.
So in terms of some aftermath then, so since August 2011, Breivik has been imprisoned at an SHS section, which is a prison section with particularly high security. His mother visited him 5 times in prison before her death in 2013, while his father claimed in a TV interview that he wishes his son was dead.
Yeah.
I mean, there were various diagnoses of Breivik during and after the trial as well, which included that he was criminally insane, a paranoid schizophrenic, psychotic as well was argued, and would eventually the court would rule that he was not psychotic and fit for trial because the defense tried to push him down the criminally not culpable route. He was also diagnosed as having a lack of empathy, which I think is fairly obvious. Homicidal, compulsive, grandiose, delusional, narcissistic and antisocial personality disorder, and also that he was potentially on the autism spectrum disorder.
In 2012, an independent report finds that the terror attack could have been avoided. The report cites slow reaction times of the police and security forces, and understaffing and failure of leadership.
Wow.
As we said, it obviously took over an hour for the police to actually arrive on the island after the first initial shot. I think as well, like we said before, a lot was made of the child support services not doing anything early on with the immediate kind of alarms with Breivik. It was later said that, a lot of the people that work within that profession who actually do the analysing were just graduates and very young. And when a scary lawyer came in and tried to, argue the innocence of, the mother, they kind of backed off and left them to it. It said, it's been said by psychiatrists now that looking at how he developed and turned into the monster that he did, if he was taken away at a younger age, this could have been avoided.
The immediate aftermath, Breivik would admit to having been inspired by Al-Qaeda and the Taliban's various terrorist attacks, but also the noted similarities between himself and Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. He actually would go on to inspire, Breivik, would actually go on to inspire other attackers as well, including the Christchurch attack in 2019, so a fairly recent one.
Yeah, Brenton Tarrant, who he actually claimed that he had a brief encounter with him, a brief conversation, but it's been highly criticised that being actually a thing with Breivik not actually having any kind of way of communicating with people on the outside, which I think is a very good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the initial aftermath as well, rescue workers would search the lake surrounding Utøya for the several weeks following the attacks to retrieve and rescue, to retrieve corpses. As well as this, a few months after the attack, and there is footage of this as well, the police actually escorted Breivik to Utoya Island, where he would spend 6 hours on a harness on this island recreating his steps, and there are some photos of him kind of mimicking.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he seems to not, obviously, like we said, he didn't think he committed a crime. He thought he was completely in the right. And
thinks he's a hero.
Yeah, it's even like what is his name? Chikatilo. When he's recreating his crimes, he's very proud of it.
Yeah,
he's going
very
around.
showy.
He's like, this is what I've done.
Yeah.
He's like, he sees us as, all this hard work, all this thought that went into it. Now it's my time to show this is why I did it. Oh, also I did this, and retracing the steps. But apparently the police said it was a reward in terms of them finding out more information. It was actually invaluable that they did that, because they were criticising initially for going that way.
Within a year of being in prison, Breivik finds his voice again and writes a 27-page letter of complaint, as well as launches a lawsuit against the Norwegian prison services, claiming that he was being held against security restrictions that he didn't feel were just, but also under poor conditions that he was kept in. And I have made a list of these complaints because...
Let's go through them.
Okay, so the first complaint was that he was separated from visitors by a glass screen, handcuffed too often, provided a PlayStation 2 and not upgraded to a PlayStation 3, too much isolation. He was provided with a rubber pen that could not be used to self-harm or harm others. He called it an almost indescribable manifestation of sadism. Guards rushing him when he was brushing his teeth by tapping their feet.
Yeah. I mean, this all hints that he's so unaware of what's the norm. That,
And I mean, to be fair, the Norwegian prison system, it looks, compared to other prisons in the world.
Yeah, so Breivik spending his sentence in a 3-room, one for sleeping, one for studying, and one for exercising cell with a TV.
It looks like a dorm room.
Yeah, he can play video games, prepare food, and do washing. And he even once built a gingerbread house as part of a prison competition. I mean, it doesn't sound like prison. He's got the absolute gall to complain about his situation where, look at UK prisons. And as well, someone who's committed such heinous crimes, thinking that he deserves a PS3.
Yeah. Well, let me continue. Cold coffee, which I don't mind. Some of his food was cooked in a microwave. denied moisturizer for his skin, and the guards were conducting too many cell searches and waking him up.
Jeez, poor guy. He sounds a bit like a Karen.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, those things, I mean...
My mum is as well, I know.
That's an expression, Dad.
I was joking, mate.
The other thing as well, is what I'd do, if he was complaining to me about having a PS2, I'd give him a PlayStation, the normal one, without a memory card so he couldn't save it.
In letters to foreign media outlets, he told about his demands to prison authorities. He said that a PlayStation 3 to replace the current PlayStation 2 would be justifiable because it offers more suitable games.
I wonder if they keep a restriction on the games he can play. I'm sure they must do.
Well, other inmates, he said, have adult games, while I only have the right to play less interesting kids' games. One example is Rayman Revolution, a game aimed at 3-year-olds. Breivik complained to prison officials.
Amazing. I mean, like, as well, apparently he'd been advertising online for a girlfriend whilst he's in jail. I haven't heard of any successes he's had from that, but I mean, there's odd people in the world. But yeah, he just seems completely unaware.
Narcissistic.
Yeah, and it seems very childlike with his complaints, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's absolutely peculiar.
Well, he testified as well that after 2 years in isolation, he has started to love the reality television show Paradise Hotel, which he says is evidence that he has become seriously brain damaged.
That is an IMDb review.
Yeah.
As well, in 2017, he's actually legally changed his name to Fjoltolf Hansen.
Yeah.
Fjoltolf Hansen. No, for Anders.
Another interesting thing on TV shows that he loved, and this again kind of highlights the fact that he was all on about ethnic cleansing and fighting multiculturalism. His 3 favourite TV shows were True Blood, The Shield, Dexter, but he only watched them while eating Chinese takeaway, which he absolutely loved.
There you go. So essentially, like we said, we can't find a clear motive other than his political beliefs, which we can't find a reason for what really stirred him to kind of lean that way.
Yeah.
But he did, one of the things he said, it wasn't a case of he hated all Muslims. He said, like, he's done that expression where it's like, I've got friends who are Muslims.
Yeah.
As if that's like proof of not being racist and whatnot. But he's essentially saying the Muslim faith is fine, but not in Norway.
Yeah. But as well, there was, what was it, an hour and a half before he emailed out the manifesto, he's claimed to have told family members and friends that he's going to do something that would make his father proud, which is an interesting thing to say when he then goes on to conduct the attacks. And obviously he's fighting against politics that his mother believed in, and obviously he's venting against her. But then they seem to rekindle their relationship after he was arrested, because on the final time that she visited him, apparently he was allowed to meet her beyond the glass and go for a final goodbye walk with her, because she was battling a long-term illness. Really difficult to find a clear motive, but I just think this guy's psyche and his upbringing and his childhood and all the way through his teenage years and adolescence, it's constant rejection, but
yeah, he was definitely
abuse.
He's definitely kind of lined up to have a very torrid time, and then definitely have impacted his mental health and the way he looked out on the world. And as I believe, this could have been avoided, which is the horrible thing. So that was the case of Anders Breivik, the Norway attacks.
On a slightly lighter note, lookalikes. Who have you got?
He had some very striking looks and very different looks.
Double bum chin.
Yeah, and he basically looked very different from time to time with very different haircuts and styles. I thought he looks like he could be in his own prog rock band.
Yeah.
Like all different types of him he could be.
He looks like a young Jamie Oliver. Also a young Ian Beale. Little bit like an older brother of Julian Assange. But my better one is that I feel he looks like an older Augustus Gloop that didn't fall down the chocolate river and grew up to commit a terrorist act.
Which Augustus Gloop are we talking? Are we talking
the original, not the Tim Burton.
Okay, yeah, that is a better shout.
That is quite good, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, the shouts were absolutely terrible.
Yeah, once arrested and in court, Breivik shaves his head and grows a beard. I do think there he looks like more of kind of a basement-dwelling Triple H. Not my... Okay.
Augustus Gloop
we'll just keep that one in. And there was also a famous Norwegian criminal in the late 1700s/early 1800s called Ole Hoyland. The likeness for Breivik, he was a famous Norwegian criminal, big bank robber in the early 1800s. It is chilling how similar they look, so we'll pop the photo up there for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll stick with those for looky-likeys.
Yes. Well, there you go. That is the case, and that's the looky-likeys. And thank you very much for watching and listening to today's episode. We appreciate it as always. Don't forget to follow us on all our socials. If you enjoyed the episode, give it a like and give us a subscribe.
And if you wish to support us in any way you can, we've also got a bunch of episodes over on our Patreon page.
Much appreciated. And until next time, like we always say.
We always say this. We can't stop saying this.
Keep doing what you do.
Keep doing.
Unless it's
killing and...
See you later.
Building.